So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Inside the Mind That Changed Modern Judaism, a discussion with Rabbi Dr. Yosef Bronstein with regards to the Torah philosophy of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And before I get started, allow me to introduce Rabbi Bronstein, although it's in the Facebook description for those who don't want to see it there. His official title goes that Yosef received a rabbinic ordination and a PhD in Talmudic studies from Yeshiva University, and is currently the Rosh Beit Midrash, which means the head of the study hall of Machon Zimrat Haaretz, which is in Efrat in Israel. And he teaches Jewish philosophy at YU, etc. But the reason that we have him on today is because of a book that he wrote. He is the author of Engaging the Essence, the Torah philosophy of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a book which came out, correct me if I'm wrong, about a year and a half ago. Is that
correct? Yes.
It was in honor, I believe, or at least in the vicinity of the Rebbe's yard site that year. So not this past Gimel Tammuz, but the Gimel Tammuz before that. And when I picked up the book, I found it to be a fantastic book. Not that I'm necessarily the biggest authority on the Rebbe's philosophy, but I definitely have spent many years of my life studying it. And I submitted it. You're not going to like this description, but I submitted it to the same rigorous testing that I submit any news agency, which is, I always laugh that whenever you read a news article about something that you're personally involved in, all of a sudden they get everything wrong. Like, we trust them whenever it comes to anything else, but all of a sudden it's a news story that we know about personally. Like, for example, last year when it came to the fires, so we had here in Pasadena about a year ago, we had the Eaton fire, which kind of ravaged our neighborhood here in Pasadena, Altadena, etc. And somehow, every other news story that I don't know anything about, I trust them that they get 100% of the details right. But then when it came to the fire, I saw them getting all sorts of details wrong, and I just assumed, no, it must be just this one they don't know about. So I submitted your book to the same test, and you passed with flying colors. What I mean by that is that I don't profess to be well-versed in every single topic, but there are certain topics that I've done a deep dive into in the Rebbe's thought, and you have chapters on them. And when I would go there, I dove immediately to the footnotes to see which talks of the Rebbe are you referencing, etc. And I saw fantastic research that was done into this, meaning you didn't miss any of them, at least the topics that I knew of. The research that should have been done on it was done. So to me, that was a good sign for the rest of the book, even with things that I don't know about. And I'm sure there are things that you got right and things that you got wrong, but I guess that's what in my perspective, makes this such a fantastic book. I'll let you describe what the book was about and what the journey to writing the book was about, and what you hope to accomplish with the book. But for now, why don't you start off by giving us just a 3-minute answer to the question, who are you? What brought you to writing about the Rebbe's Torah? I'm sure it's a 3-hour answer, and we'll get to have that when you're here over Shabbat. But for now, if you could just give us a 3-minute answer for that, we'd appreciate it.
Oh, first of all, thank you so much, Rabbi Rifkin, for the generous invitation to Pasadena. I'm very excited to be able to join the community over Shabbos, and I'm very excited to meet all the community members, to meet Rabbi Rifkin in person, and to be able to enjoy an amazing Shabbos together. Who am I? That's a great question. I try to ask myself that every day. My name is Yosef Bronstein. I was born to Chaim and Brenda Bronstein. I grew up in Far Rockaway, New York, on the East Coast of America. And I lived on the East Coast of America until I was 32 years old, which is when I made Aliyah, immigrated to Israel, and I live here in Beit Shemesh. I grew up in the modern Orthodox community in America. My father is a Yeshiva University graduate. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik of Yeshiva University. I went to Yeshiva University's high school, so I received a rigorous training in Talmudic studies. I received what they told us was a top-notch education in secular studies. And I was privileged to be able to continue that at Yeshiva University itself. So my official training is really more in the Talmud, in the ins and outs of the Jewish legal system, but all the while on the side, I was interested less in addition to the what of Judaism and how to do it, I became interested in the why of Judaism. Because I was growing up in a modern Orthodox world, I saw there were many other avenues of life. I saw the modern Orthodox Judaism was not the only option available to me. I saw many of my friends going along different paths, to the right or to the left, Jewish and not Jewish. And I felt like I needed an anchor. I felt like I needed to explore the why of Judaism. I ended up spending a lot of time in the Yeshiva University library, just doing a lot of reading, reading Jewish mystical tradition, Jewish philosophical tradition. And I think it's funny. Most people encounter Chabad on campus, they encounter Chabad through a Farbrengen, they encounter Chabad through an event.
On a street corner.
I'm sorry?
On a street corner.
On a street corner. I encountered Chabad in the 5th floor of the Yeshiva University library, basically all by myself. It's probably maybe the only person in the world to encounter Chabad that way. But once I encountered Chabad, it really struck with me. It really struck a chord. I really felt like I stumbled upon divine providence, had me stumble upon the right shelf, the right books, the right introductions. I started meeting real Chabad people through my studies when I was trying to study from live people and not just from books. And that's really how I encountered the thought of the Lubavitch Rebbe and the thought of the Hasidic tradition in general and the Chabad tradition in particular. That's my story, more or less.
Right. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that not every thought and book and school of study that you encountered, you choose to write a book on. So I guess my follow-up question is, what brought you to write this book, which essentially was committing to take, or I guess the way I'm looking at it is you committed to writing the book and that made you take a deep dive, and maybe it wasn't that way. Maybe you took a deep dive and then decided to write a book. So bring us into that journey.
Right. So my official studies was never in Jewish philosophy, Jewish thought, Jewish mysticism. I have a rabbinic ordination in traditional Talmudic studies, traditional Jewish law. My PhD is in academic Talmudic studies, meaning studying the history and the context of the time period, a little bit of Greek, a little bit of Persian, what was happening when the rabbis in the Mishnah, the rabbis in the Talmud were talking, what was happening politically, what was happening culturally. So that's really where my credentials are. But all the while, I was studying Jewish thought on my own and in academic context, in rabbinic context. And I slowly but surely, over the course of maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 years, I started gathering sources in Chabad thought. And whenever I study something, I try to make files for myself, try to create themes, try to see what the main ideas are. Eventually, I started teaching Jewish thought at Yeshiva University. I was studying Talmudic studies, but they had an opening there, and they asked me if I would teach Jewish thought. And after a couple of years, I asked them, would you be interested in a course on the thought of the Lubavitch Rebbe? I hadn't seen any college listings yet.
Let me interrupt for just 1 second. For our audience, clarify, because I know you're trying to translate to English the word machshava, but take 30 seconds just to explain what you mean when you say Jewish thought as opposed to Talmudic studies.
Okay, so thank you so much. Talmudic studies is the legal system of Judaism, the more of what to do, how to observe Shabbat, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how to make Kiddush properly, how to pray properly, all of those laws. And the entire legal system, think about the Constitution all the way down to contemporary Supreme Court cases. You're studying that from the Talmud all the way down to contemporary responsa. But the Jewish thought is more of the why of Judaism. We have this entire legal system, but how does this legal system bring one closer to the divine, bring one closer to God, make one a better person? What's the thought system behind the legal system, the meta system, as you might say? That is less studied in traditional rabbinic settings. For whatever reason, we can get into it over Shabbat if you want.
Yeah.
But I was teaching the why, the different thought systems, Rav Kook, Rabbi Soloveitchik, 20th century thought, 19th century thought. I was teaching these things in Yeshiva University, and I offered them to teach a course in the thought of the Lubavitch Rebbe because I felt like I had enough material, and unable for myself, I wanted to organize it. I felt like it was very meaningful for me, and I felt like it might be meaningful for my students who, most of them had not encountered Chabad, particularly Chabad thought. Definitely to the credit of the Yeshiva University administration, they said yes, as long as it was academically rigorous. They said I could teach whatever I wanted, basically. So I organized a course on the thought of the Lubavitch Rebbe. What really got me to write this book was the responses to that course. I taught this course for 2 years to different students. And I saw that eyes lighting up. I saw people that were less engaged in Judaism becoming interested. I saw people connecting dots to the things that they were doing anyway, but this was giving them new meaning, breathing new life into their Judaism. And I really saw in the real life with my students the impact that these ideas, these abstract ideas, was having on the real lives of my students. And that really got me thinking, I feel like I stumbled upon a gift. I feel like God granted me. I happen to have stumbled on the right shelf. I happen to be the type of person that likes to organize things. I happen to be teaching in Yeshiva University. God gave me this gift. And as we'll see over Shabbos, one of the things that Lubavitch Rabbi often emphasize, if God gives you a gift through no credit of your own, you have a responsibility to share it with others.
You're not allowed to ignore it.
Not allowed to ignore it. I'm not the most outgoing person in the world. My natural setting is in a library, in a study hall, surrounded by books. So I figured, let me try to write a book. Let me go see if there's interest. And I saw, when I saw what books exist in Jewish thought, not for the academic, not for the rabbi, but for the educated lay Jewish person, I saw there was a whole array of books on different topics in Jewish philosophy, Jewish mysticism, Jewish thoughts, but there was no single access point to the thought of Chabad or the thought of the Lubavitch Rebbe in particular. But I figured I had a course that was an attempt to organize the thought thematically and present it to non-Chabad people. And then that was really my motivation to write this book.
The journey to the book now becomes obvious. I'm actually really curious to hear more about the reactions that you were having to the course. So this is interesting. You're teaching people obviously the thought of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and by thought we mean the why of Judaism, and the thought system. And while you're doing this, I imagine you're learning a lot while you're teaching, because you're preparing your classes, you're organizing your notes, etc. So there's a lot of learning while you're teaching. I know that myself. I teach for a living, so teaching is my favorite way to learn. And so I want to talk about the reactions of the students. So first of all, if you could paint for us a picture of who those students are, number one, like what spectrum of religious, using the classic labels. I know we don't like labels, but using are they Reform? Are they all Jewish? Are they all Frum? Are they all religious? Or right, etc. And then when you say their reaction that this was helping to inspire them in their Yiddishkeit, this is fascinating to me, because you were essentially doing something which doesn't often get done. You were exposing them only to the academic and world view, if you will, of like the philosophy of the Rebbe, without exposing them to all the other things that a Chabadnik would usually, like I expose people to philosophy of the Rebbe all the time, but it always comes hand in hand with, and I'd like to encourage you to put on tefillin, and I'd like to invite you to my house for Shabbat dinner, and whatever, So there's the philosophy, and it usually goes hand in hand together with the practical. But I assume you were not acting as a Chabad rabbi, that you didn't end off each class saying, "Hey, does anybody want to put on tefillin?" So this is an interest, and yet it's having that effect on them on its own. So if you could talk a little bit to that, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the population in the class was mainly coming from the modern Orthodox world, meaning the college students, they grew up mostly observant. Some were still observant. Some were falling out of observance. And they were all people that had somewhat of a Jewish educational background. So that's a spectrum that we're talking about. We're talking about people that were familiar with the basics of Judaism. Some were more observant when they entered the class, and some were less observant. But they all had somewhat of an interest. Otherwise, they wouldn't be taking this class. Wouldn't be taking this class in the first place. And 100%, I was teaching it in a college setting. It was semi-yeshiva, semi-college setting. And therefore, my goal was not to, let's use the word proselytize. My goal was not to make people more observant. My goal was really to act as a conduit to present the thought of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in as rigorous, academic, but clear of a fashion as possible. To use Chabad terminology, I was more of a kli, more of a vessel, a conduit for the thought of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I tried to draw no practical conclusions, and I also tried to teach it without my own opinions. Meaning, I wouldn't say I think this is mainstream Judaism and there's just a Chabad flavor to it, or here I think Maimonides disagrees with what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. I really tried to present it. This is the thought of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Here are the original sources. Here's what he did with them. Here are the programs he created out of them. And in a more of a take it or leave it type approach, in more of an academic setting, which is why it was fascinating to me that I lived on campus and I did host my students for Shabbat meals, not as a Chabad rabbi, just because I happened to live on campus and people lived away from home and needed right. Shabbat meals. So these conversations were happening both in class and out of class. And people were telling me that they were finding their Judaism. Maybe somebody was putting on tefillin every day anyway, but once he had a conception of what a mitzvah is in a Chabad setting, so that was giving new life to the way and the manner and the enthusiasm with which they put on tefillin every day. I had another student who was taking science classes, and he found the Lubavitcher Rebbe's perspective on contemporary physics and theoretical physics to be utterly fascinating. It's like he did not think a Hasidic Rebbe would have insights into the spiritual meaning of contemporary physics. So different people were coming at it from different vantage points. But there was a common denominator that most of my class felt that their religiosity was positively impacted by just the thought, the ideas, the Torah of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And once I saw that, not just once, but twice and several times over, I really felt like I had a responsibility to share it to this community which wasn't being serviced, so to speak, by traditional Chabad rabbis.
I love this whole thing because it's so different. I think it's so unique. I'm not aware of even one other person that is your peer in this type of endeavor in the way it came about. And now obviously I see the natural pathway towards writing a book, so that's fantastic. So I guess the next question to ask you is, what do you hope? Now this book has been published, I guess you could talk a little bit about the reception that the book has had, and also what do you hope that the book accomplishes, or what did you hope that the book accomplishes, and did it meet those expectations, and how has the book been received, and what is the impact that it's having on people? And you could talk about, I imagine there's different circles, like I'm a Chabadnik, I read your book, I had one it had an impact on me, and then there's other people as well. So if you could talk a little bit to that.
Great. So my goal in the book was relatively modest. It was to give people that did not have a background in the thought of the Hasidic thought, the thought of the Lubavitch Rebbe, the thought of Chabad more generally, an access point, a thematic overview of the way the Lubavitch Rebbe viewed the world, viewed Torah, viewed mitzvos, viewed every aspect of the world, and then things click. So what a person does with that information, I think, changes from person to person. For one person, it might just be, well, now I have another perspective on Torah. It totally does not resonate with me, but I see the internal logic in this perspective. For somebody else, it might be, I always thought Chabadniks were weird. I always thought that this community was doing strange things. Now, at least I can understand where another Jewish community is coming from, and therefore you're sort of helping foster a sense of understanding and community among different communities of Jews, which I think is also very important. And my third goal was that somebody might take this information and be like, wow, this resonates with me. I am going to practice more Judaism. I'm going to give more life, have certain intentions now when I perform a mitzvah that I was doing anyway, and it's going to bring me closer to the divine. It's going to bring me closer to God. So right. My goal was just to accurately convey the information. And those are the three levels I had in mind. Some people will just read it and be great. Some people will read it and be like, now I understand Chabad. Some people will read it and it would resonate with them.
So like you said, very modest, and just paint the picture. Your target audience, obviously, you're happy for anybody to pick up the book, but in your head, your target audience was who? Was like a typical YU student.
Exactly. I felt like there are other major Jewish thinkers in the pantheon of modern Jewish thought, and each one has a book that is somewhat of an access point for people that don't have the time, the wherewithal, or the skills to go through the original material. But I felt like the Lubavitch Rebbe deserves to be part of that pantheon of great modern Jewish thinkers. And there was no book in English that would be an access point to somebody on the outside. So that's really what I was trying to create.
So to a certain degree, we can almost say you were solving your own problem. In other words, when you came as a student, yes, there was no access point for you. You had to take a deep dive in order to do that. And then eventually you stumbled into teaching classes on it, et cetera. So you were like, let me write the book that can be an access point for this particular person. There's lots of access points to the Rebbe's thought, but maybe they're only in Hebrew, or maybe they're only from a more sensitive and compassionate perspective, not from an academic philosophical perspective. And this was the goal, to fill that void.
Exactly. That's when I pitched the book to various people. That was what I said. I said Yosef Bronstein at age 24 would have really appreciated a book like this. I don't know if there's a market for it, but I know I would have appreciated a book like this. So let me give it a go.
Right. Okay, we discussed you're very unique, so maybe there's only one of you. Okay, but clearly, well, there's definitely only one of you, but I meant in this category. But clearly, the book has had quite a reception. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Now the book has been published and it's been out for a year and a half. Who have you found is reading the book? Who is picking it up? Who is asking you questions about it? Who is reaching out to you about it? And in what way is it having an impact on people?
That's great. So to be totally honest, I have not necessarily been tracking reception. Okay. I honestly don't. I don't even know how many copies were sold. Thank God, my life is busy. I've moved on to other projects. But I do receive emails, texts, WhatsApps, and other such forms of communication. And I have been surprised about the wide breadth of people that have taken interest in this book. Meaning, I have the original target audience. Let's say Yeshiva University students or graduates. The book has definitely made inroads in that community, particularly among rabbis, among educators. That it's another way of thinking about the things they're doing anyway, the things they're thinking about anyway. Right. And thank God, I feel like the book has made inroads in my own native community. But in addition to that, I think two other communities that I received contact from that I didn't necessarily expect. Number one was the non-observant community, people that weren't necessarily seriously engaged in Jewish thought, in Torah study, meaning I come from a community, I come from a world where every day, morning and evening, I was in front of the Talmud. I was studying. Reading books like this is natural. There are many Jews who feel very committed about Judaism, but they don't necessarily have the same ethos of Torah study as the community that I come from as the Yeshiva University community. And they wouldn't necessarily pick up a book about a different Jewish thinker. But clearly, Chabad means something to a lot of people, and a lot of people that they wouldn't necessarily have expected. People telling me, I'm living by myself in state X, and I don't have a Jewish community, and I don't do regular Torah study, but I was once touched by a Chabad rabbi on campus. I saw your book on Amazon, I bought it, and it's giving me new perspective, and through your book, I'm going to Chabad.org, I'm reconnecting with Chabad. That for me has been extremely gratifying, and I thank God every day for the ability to reach people like that, because that is something which I didn't expect. And if a book like mine, which again I was more from an academic perspective, just trying to present things clearly, impacts people who are less affiliated, less committed in day-to-day Judaism, I think that is truly a blessing for me. And the second community...
One second, before you get to the second community, if I could just say a thank you from that perspective, because, and I think I thanked you the first time I spoke to you, as a Chabad rabbi, that is often a misconception I think that many people have, and not to their fault or to our fault. It's just because the nature of Chabad is that often people have a very, very brief encounter with the Chabad rabbi that they have an encounter with. The people who become very close with, let's say, someone like me or any Chabad rabbi for that matter, and have a multi-year, maybe even multi-decade relationship, those people I think then get exposed to everything slowly over time. But to someone who, let's say, is going to be a student on campus and is going to go to a Shabbat dinner at their local Chabad on campus only 5 to 10 to 15 times over the course of their 3 years at college, I think those people tend to think that Chabad, they tend to have a very superficial perspective of Chabad. And again, I'm not blaming anyone. I think this is a very normal, natural perspective. They think that Chabad is maybe just, I don't know, some sort of humanitarian, let's give out free meals to students because we want them to have Shabbat dinner, whatever it is. Or maybe they look at us as more on the proselytizing side. Or maybe or for, let's say, a religious student, maybe they just look at it as, I went on vacation to a certain island and there was a Chabad house there and they can give them food, etc. Which are all things that Chabad gladly, those are roles that Chabad gladly fills. But I think we often experience a frustration when people don't understand us, and it's a natural frustration. It's fine. It's part of doing business, if you will, that people don't realize that there's actually a huge philosophical background behind the fact that I'm standing on a street corner and asking you to put on tefillin, or behind the fact that I just met you and I say, hey, would you like to study some Torah together, or behind the fact that I provide kosher food for you even though I never met you and you're not going to be paying me for it, and I'm here, or maybe you will be paying me for it but completely underpaying, or whatever it is. And I'm here to provide that service in the Barbados or whatever, on Barbados or whatever it is. And this book, even though I'm sure not everyone will read it, but this book at least is an answer to someone who, or a perspective to someone who might not, whom their exposure to Chabad might only be on that level. And to us, we're very thankful for that, because when we do these things, it is backed up by this book, or really by the Rebbe's Torah, directly from the source. And it's gratifying to see someone appreciate that and put that down in a book and say clearly, I'm not going to talk about how many Chabad houses there are, and I'm not going to talk about how many lives they've touched, and I'm not going to talk about all their inspirational work, not to discount it, but that's not what this book is about. I'm going to talk about the behind the scenes, if you will. So the way I see this book is almost like let's peel back the superficial layer of what you see of Chabad in the public, and let's dive beneath the surface to gain some insight into how all that works from a philosophical perspective. So in that regard, I say thank you. But to bring our conversation back on track, you were going to talk about a second community that surprised you that they were touched by your book.
Right. The second community was I guess you, Chabad Rabbanim, Chabad Shluchim, Shluchot, Rebbetzins. People on the inside that I did not expect to be interested. I mean, I expected people to be curious, and maybe some people on the intellectual fringes of Chabad would be curious in a book like this, coming from an outsider, and maybe open it up and skim through it. But I didn't expect to be receiving texts and emails from people on Chabad Shluchim on campus, Chabad Rebbetzins, saying that I'm using your book for source material. It's organized, it's presented in an organized fashion, and it's helping me give more lectures, teach more Torah in a clearer fashion, because you know better than me. I'm sure you're very pressed for time. I'm sure you're very busy. I'm sure your wife is very busy. I'm sure everybody you work with is extremely busy. And it's almost like I hope, I did not expect this, but it seems like for some people at least, it's almost like an AI tool that it gives you I guess, an organized presentation with sources, so it's easier to present the Torah that you were planning on presenting anyway, without having to search for this book, this talk in that book, and this talk in that book. It's more or less organized in there.
100%, and thank you for that. On a personal level, I've read through much of the book, and actually I started studying it one-on-one with someone here in the community. I do not believe this is a book you read. I believe it's a book you study. And in that regard, I want to just issue a warning to you that I'm not sure how well you footnoted it, but definitely the people in my category, we spend a lot of time in the footnotes. Like we go, I go look up. I have a look at the sichos here on the thing, and the Torah Menachem, and Igros of the Rebbe, etc. And whenever you're referencing that, I'm often going and looking that up. And so far, you've scored 10 out of 10. Every footnote is correct, and I'm checking them up, etc. But I think often when an author writes a book, the footnotes are more just for academic integrity, and in theory, if somebody wants to go look it up. But the idea that there are people that are looking through those footnotes copiously, which I've definitely been doing, and I'm sure other Chabad rabbis do as well, is good feedback to get as an author. It wasn't a waste of time.
It's definitely intimidating, and I'm happy I did not think about it from the start.
Okay, so let's move on from our conversation about the book to talk about the Rebbe, your relationship with the Rebbe, and our upcoming weekend. So there's now quite a few people watching on Facebook, and if anybody wants to post a question, you can do so in the comments. I'll be happy to ask it to Rabbi Dr. Yosef. What I guess I want you to answer two questions. So before I ask the questions, and another note to all those that are watching is that the reason we're conducting this interview is because Yosef is going to be here with us in Pasadena starting this Friday. He'll be here over the entire Shabbat, Friday night, Shabbat day, Motzei Shabbat, and we'll have many opportunities to hear from him. He'll be talking, he'll be doing Q&As, he'll be doing book signings after Shabbat. And if you'd like to join for that, of course, the link to register is on our website. It's PasadenaJewishAcademy.com/oneg. And you can either do it on the website, or you can see the full schedule on the website to decide which parts you'd like to attend. We encourage you to do so. Now, so on to my final two questions, which with this we'll conclude. So the first one is, today is Zayin Shabbat, which is the 7th day of the month of Shabbat, and your book actually opens up by talking about what's known as the coronation mimer. Actually, I should say you do give some background first, but you have a chapter on what's called the coronation mimer, which is the Hasidic discourse that the Rebbe said, which officially made the Rebbe, which officially made Hasidim recognize the Rebbe as Rebbe. That was said on the 10th of Shabbat, which we'll be commemorating this Wednesday. We'll be commemorating, at this point, it was in 1950 or 1951, so at this point it'll be, 85 years. And the question becomes, what does that day mean to, and that's why we're having this Shabbat in proximity to that day. But I guess my question to you is, having now explored a lot of the Rebbe's Torah and become a representative to one degree or another through this book of the Rebbe's thought process, what does this day mean to you? A commemoration of that day, an anniversary of that day.
So what does it mean to me? I mean, honestly, it makes me thank God, because the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as I'm sure you know, was not somebody that was seeking out leadership, and it could have very well have been. There could have been an alternative timeline where he would have lived out his life as a writer, as a publisher, as an electrical engineer in the Brooklyn Yards in the Navy. He was not somebody who was seeking out leadership. But clearly, God had different plans, and in Yud Shvat 1951, Tafshin Yud Aleph, God set up circumstances that's almost forced him to take over the leadership of Chabad. What I find fascinating is that in that first coronation speech, the first series of speeches in 1951 when he took over, it's really the blueprint for everything he was going to say for the next 40 years. And it's amazing. I go back to that. I've read through that coronation mimer many, many times. I go back to it every Yud Shvat. I try to review it, which I think is the custom among Chabad Hasidim. I don't do the Frierdiker Rebbes. I just do the Lubavitcher Rebbes. I hope that's okay. But it's amazing that somebody that was never seeking leadership, but had such a clear perspective on the totality of Torah sources, a clear perspective about what was happening to Jewry and the world in 1950 going forward, and have the ability to fuse those two perspectives of the perspective of the entirety of Torah and his perspective of history and what was happening in the world, fuse them together and create a blueprint for what needed to happen in order for the world to reach a state of redemption. And I don't see anything in the thought afterwards that was a major, major revolution or innovation or radically different. What the Rebbe set out in 1951, he had the blueprint in his mind in 1951. The ideas were developed, they were actualized, they were concretized, they were fleshed out. But it's amazing that just think about the alternative reality that if something would have happened, all of this would have been kept within him. But God sort of forced him to take center stage and say, this is the way I view the world. This is the way I view Torah. This is what Jews have to do in this generation in order for redemption to happen. And it's just a blessing that God made him get up there and take on the leadership and say what he had to, and say what he was, and bring out what he had within him.
It's fascinating that you mentioned that this idea of it all being there at the beginning, because it's actually one of the things I think that you set out to do in your book, and that I think you successfully did in your book, which is, I think the Rebbe does sometimes get credit for his revolutionary approach to X or to Y. In other words, you'll read an article or maybe even a full book on the Rebbe's perspective on peace in the Middle East, let's say, or on Israel, or on the state of Israel and what the role of the state of Israel should be. And then people will be like, wow, the Rebbe had a revolutionary perspective on Israel. Or then you'll read another book and it'll be about the Rebbe's perspective on mental health. And wow, it was so revolutionary, etc. And you'll see the same thing about feminism, or the same thing about I don't know, or about Mashiach, or about education of children, etc. And I think one of the most beautiful things about your book is that you show that most of these things, even though they usually have moments within the Rebbe's leadership when they kind of exploded and they became a big thing. But I think one of the things you set out to point out is that they all fit. They come back to that day. And they come back to that coronation maimer, but more importantly, they come back to a holistic view that the Rebbe had, which the Rebbe's view on feminism, the Rebbe's view on mental health, and the Rebbe's view on the state of Israel are really all part of one worldview, of which each of those are offshoots, of which each of those are details. I think that's what's so brilliant about the book. And I want to encourage, by the way, the book will be available for sale here at Chabad, but even if you're watching and you're not going to be here over this weekend for whatever reason, if you'd like to buy the book, this is the book. It's called Engaging the Essence, and you can buy it on Amazon. If you're here, obviously you can get it signed, and you can buy it, and you can get it signed by the author. But I encourage you to buy it and to, again, I'm going to correct myself, not to read it, but to learn it, to actually take a deep dive into it and to go through each chapter properly. You'll find that your life is enhanced from it. Not just that you gain more knowledge. And I say this is, although you set out to make it more of an informational book, I think it's more of a transformational book. I think it's more of a book that you read and it actually transforms a person's life. And I mean that as the greatest compliment to an author, that it's not just a book, it's actually like, I don't think you meant it as a self-help book, but I think if somebody reads it that way, it'll provide a lot of help in their lives. I
appreciate that. Thank you. I know the Rebbe's Torah has touched me deeply and has definitely transformed aspects of my life. And if I could pass on that blessing to other people, then I think it's definitely a merit to me.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up, and I thank you for your time for doing this. I know it's already past 10 o'clock we moved it earlier, so it's past 9 o'clock in Eretz Yisrael. So we're going to wrap this up. I just want to ask you one final question, and then we'll see if anybody else has any questions. They're welcome to type them into the chat. If you could just talk to what you hope to accomplish over this weekend while you're here. Obviously, we're giving you a lot of opportunities to talk to the community and to everyone who's going to be here. And I'm sure most of the people will be here mainly for the gefilte fish and not for you. But for those that are coming to hear you, I don't want to push your ego to stroke your ego too much. But for those that may be interested in hearing you, what do you hope that they will walk away from with this weekend, and what do you hope to share over this weekend?
Fantastic. So I think what you said immediately prior about the Lubavitch Rebbe is a good segue. What I hope to accomplish is to share ideas from the Lubavitch Rebbe that touch me, transformational ideas. This is not going to be a Shabbos just of information. Hopefully there will be a lot of information that's shared, but I'm picking out particular ideas and particular themes that I feel like were very relevant for me as somebody living in the 21st century, connected to the world, learning Greek, learning Middle Persian, following the news, and that definitely is part of the modern world. Ideas from the Lubavitch Rebbe that definitely helped me reorient my Judaism, my relationship with God. And because the Lubavitch Rebbe's thought is so holistic and it's so unified, I want to try to do that on various levels. I want to spend Friday night speaking about the introspective level, the human being and their own soul. What did the Lubavitch Rebbe teach about a person's relationship to themselves with their own soul? What does the notion of a soul mean? What impact does it have on a person's self-perception? Then I want to move on Shabbos day to Jewish peoplehood, not expanding from the soul to the Jewish nation. And then I want to go from the Jewish nation to the world. I want to have one talk from the Rebbe's perspective of for American society, for non-Jewish society more generally, and what that means for Mashiach, and what that means for the Jewish perspective on redemption. What I hope to accomplish is to take one or two ideas out of these very, very broad concentric circles and show how they're connected, they're different, they're unique to their ideas are unique unto themselves, but they're all connected. There's general thematic material that and a broad perspective and sources that connect all of them, and to show how this holistic perspective could impact the person about the way they view themselves, but the way they view the relationship to the Jewish people, and the way they view the responsibility as a citizen of the world. All of them oriented towards God. All of them within the framework of a relationship that the Jewish person has with the divine. So thank you.
I love it. Thank you very much. We're so glad that you're joining us. Again, for those of you that are just tuning in, Rabbi Bronstein will be with us. By the way, I'm not sure what to call you. Is it Yosef? Is it Rabbi? Is it Doctor?
I'm happy with Yosef. I mean, Rabbi and Doctor are two titles that I gained over the course of my studies. So it's up to you. But
you're saying they're technically accurate, but you're okay with the other one, right? So Yosef will be joining us, God willing, over the entire weekend, this coming Shabbat, and I encourage all of you to register today at PasadenaJewishAcademy.com/oneg. And I want to thank you, Yosef, for your time and for staying up for us and for joining us here live and for sticking through the technical glitches that we had at the beginning with bringing you live on Facebook and then your camera wasn't working, etc. I'm glad we got past that. I think the Rebbe would be proud that even though the technical elements of the world were standing in the way, we managed to jump over them and to actually overcome that. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see all of you this coming Shabbos, starting at 5 o'clock, and then going for 25 hours straight. Well, okay, we'll go
Rifkin and the entire Pasadena Jewish community, I'm so excited to join you over Shabbos, and thank you.
Looking forward. Laila Tov.
Laila.